Oh, it's been a while since I've done a live. I'm so excited. Welcome, beautiful people who are joining live or listening to the replay. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Nicole Murphy, and I wanted to start doing some lives talking about the courage to speak up, talking about relationships, talking about changing your mind, talking about um, just different topics that will help us cultivate more intimate, meaningful connections, which I think will help cultivate a more intimate, connective world. So I have my good friend, Shawna Bannerman. Let's see here. I'm going to invite you, Shawna, to the conversation. Shawna.
Hi.
Hi. How's it
How
going?
is good. How are you?
I'm good. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
Great.
Audio testing. So a little background story, and then we're going to jump into it right away. Shawna and I met a few years ago working at the Nate Nugget, and we became good friends and ended up working together at the Nate Nugget, running the team, as well as living together right before the pandemic hit. And at that time, I would say I lean towards more anxious attachment style, and Shauna leans toward more of an avoidant attachment style. So since we were really into self-development and growth, we understood what these things were, but we didn't realize that through a friendship, you can really do a lot of work in this area. So I'm going to start it off with a question that I was kind of laughing about last night because I am scared to ask it, Shauna. Um, what was it like for you to move in with someone who is an anxious attachment style?
The first word that comes to mind is annoying. That seems so mean, but like obviously I loved you so much. I love you so much. It was just different to get used to. I think I had lived with anxious attachment style people in the past, but I didn't realize what was happening, and I didn't realize that I was avoidant. So when you wanted to like come in my room and just hang out and chat, I'd be like, please leave. I want to be alone. And it didn't really have to do with you. It's just, I mean, I do typically tend to go towards avoidant, but I also just am like, you're 99% extrovert. I'm 49% extrovert. So I'm 50% less likely to want to hang out than you are.
It's
So,
true. It's true. It's true. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's funny because, and this is what we'll talk about, if you guys experience this in relationships, friendships, work relationships, I find I get really anxious around close friendships. When I was leading the Nate Nugget team or when I'm in a work environment, that can really spark me as well. And then in romantic relationships, but not every single relationship. But anyway, what ends up happening is when someone pushes, or you feel that energy of someone pushing you away, it actually makes you want to fix it more. That's the best way to describe it. So it sparks more anxiety in you, or it can. Doesn't do that as much for me now because I'm aware of it, but it can spark more anxiety. So it's like, oh, I can feel an annoyance, but now I want to see what Sean is feeling, fix that feeling, make sure I can, do a better job as a friend. But that that isn't necessarily the best way to go about it.
Yeah. And for me, I didn't realize what was going on, and I didn't realize that it could be solved by simply just saying, like, hey, I need some time alone right now. And that
Yeah.
would have been totally fine, just speaking what I need and setting that boundary or whatever. But I didn't really realize what was going on. I also kind of thought there was something wrong with me, that I didn't want to hang out with you. So then that sparked like I'd be annoyed, and then I would get kind of angry, more so with myself than with you for not speaking up for what I need. And then you would feel my energy, and then I would kind of try to push you away with that energy rather than just tell you, hey, I need some time alone right now. So yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah. So then people might be wondering, they might be in a situation like this, whether with a roommate, a romantic partner, or whatever. Um, what are some practical tips on like how did we work through that type of stuff?
I think one thing that was important for us was to remember that it was never personal, really.
Mm.
Like, I think for you, when I would ask you, like, I need some space, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it took you a bit of getting used to realize it wasn't personal. It was just, I just needed some space. It wouldn't matter who you were, basically. Am I right in saying that?
Yep, totally.
Yeah. Realizing that's not personal for sure. And then also just like, for a long time, like I said, I thought there was something wrong with me, that I didn't want to be hanging out all the time. And that, like, I set a boundary, actually, that my room was my space. That if Nicole wanted to come into my room, she had to knock on my door, just ask first before coming in. And for a long time, I wrestled with that because I felt like there was something wrong with me.
Just to clarify, though, if her door was shut, I wouldn't just walk in.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not. They're like, Nicole's just trouncing on boundaries. No, it would be obviously if the door was open, but there was a boundary even if the door is open. Yeah.
And I just really felt like in the entire world, I felt like I didn't have anywhere to be, that I could just be by myself and like really decompress. And so I really just needed my room to be just a me space. And I felt like there was something wrong with me for wanting to ask for that from you. But finally just like listening to what I needed and setting that boundary, and things got a lot better after setting that. And even like after that, it didn't bother me so much when you did come in my room. It's like I just needed to set that boundary and know that I could have that if I needed it.
Yeah, I want to touch on this too, because for me, I actually really like my alone time as well. And I really like my alone space. So when someone's like in an anxious or leans towards enabling type of behavior, other people's energies affect me so much that it's like, I think that's why I go into, if you're feeling annoyed by me or there's an anxious energy or something you're feeling, I think I need to somehow make you happy in order to make me happy. So that's it's very self-centered. This is not this is not healthy, if that's the way to put it. But that's the thought process. So it's like, I actually, once you made that boundary, it helped me too, because then I was like, okay, Shawna's energy's in that room. Okay, if she needs to feel whatever she needs to feel, I'm not responsible for it. And she can be in that space, and I can be doing my own thing too.
Yeah. And oh my God, I just had a thought and completely lost it. So keep talking, it'll come back to me.
No. It was interesting because, okay, so we move in together, and I've lived with lots of people and had like I've always had good roommate experiences. But we move in together. You're nervous about this, more nervous than I was at the time.
Yeah.
And a few months later, the pandemic hits, and it's like we're in each other's space all the time in an apartment.
Yeah. So we lasted, I think, 5 days before we had literally a screaming match, which was rare for us. It was, we would like have arguments or fights or whatever fairly consistently after this point. Before this point, I think we kind of just like,
it was an ignoring. It was an ignoring. Yeah.
Avoidance of what needed to be talked about. But about 5 days into the pandemic, I remember having a screaming match, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but I do remember saying, I feel like I can't feel my feelings around you.
Yeah.
And then, do you remember what you said to that?
Well, because it's kind of, actually, this is a good segue, because it's kind of what I was touching on. It's like, I feel all the feelings you feel. So it's like, you can't hide your feelings from me whatsoever.
So it's not that I can't feel them. It's that I can feel them, and you know what I'm feeling.
Yes.
So I can't hide anything. But that's what I would do. I would feel like frustrated or annoyed, or just like, I don't know, I just wanted you to like wash a dish or something like that. And I just couldn't just verbalize that. Like, and like us living together was actually so revolutionary, because I realized that every person I have lived with in the past, I've had huge tensions, which I thought, of course I thought I was just the victim. Like, they were the problem, blah, blah, blah. But no, I was a huge component of that. And I really had to look at that and realize that, what did we say? I can be very difficult.
Yeah, so I can be annoying.
Yes. But
Shawna can be difficult.
Yeah. So yeah, I really had to look at that and realize that I played a huge role in that. And just not asking for what I needed when I wanted it, or instead of asking for what I wanted, I would just put out this awful energy and not say anything. And then Nicole obviously picked up on that, and yeah.
Yeah, so that's actually, I'm going to bring in the four horsemen right now, because I'm going to probably talk about this in every interview I do, because this was revolutionary for me. John Gottman, who studied relationships, specifically romantic, but everything I've learned from it, you can apply to non-romantic relationships, and I highly would recommend looking into it. But the four horsemen of killing communication, killing relationship, are contempt, criticism, stonewalling, and defensiveness. And so when Shawna's doing something like stonewalling, because an avoidant will often lean towards something like stonewalling, so there's an ignoring energy, but the tension is so palpable that for somebody who's highly sensitive, and both Shawna and I are highly sensitive to energies, that's the whole thing, but it's like it often can throw someone like me. I go to defensiveness because I can feel the tension. I don't know how to fix it because there's no communication. There's this elephant, this tension in the room, and so then I go into defensiveness and I try to fix it or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I literally thought that stonewalling was an appropriate way to handle an argument until I lived with you. And I think a lot of people still do. A lot of people think that it's just a normal way to handle a disagreement or an argument, to just ignore the person, ignore the situation, and then continue on.
And then pretend nothing happened.
Yeah.
Even though it's like throwing things into the closet, it never gets resolved, and the tensions are there. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And that's how I grew up. That's how my family typically handled situations, is that they didn't. So I really thought that was normal. And then living with you, it occurred to me that that's not normal. That's incredibly destructive, and that's a lot of the reason that I have the trauma that I have growing up that way. And yeah, it's still an interesting balance though, when something needs to be addressed and when something doesn't. Maybe that's something we'd get into a little later, but
yeah, why don't we talk about that now? Because the one thing that did help us specifically is when someone's going into a stonewall response, it's like a flooding of emotion. So you actually cannot see clearly in that state. So something that was really, this was actually probably the changing factor for when we would have arguments or have hard conversations. You would ask for space. So you would say something like, okay, I just need to take some space right now and just like collect my thoughts. And because I luckily had done certain research, like I knew that was a good way for you to like rebalance and be able to think clearly. But as an anxious, I wanted to fix things right away. I wanted to have everything okay right away. So you had to ask for your need and go and have the courage to come back and have the conversation. Whereas I had to sit in that space, trusting you were going to come back to that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we did that cycle a couple of times, the cycle got, there was less times in between.
Yeah. We got much better at that. And that has helped me in so many ways, having learned that. Now that I am in a romantic relationship, which thanks for that, by the way. You don't know, I'm engaged to Nicole's cousin, who she introduced me to. But yeah, that's helped us so much too, because now I know, like, if I need space or something, and he's more similar. He is avoidant anxious. He has a bit of both. So sometimes he will say the same thing, like, I just need to collect my thoughts and think, and then come back to this discussion, and then we'll work it out, kind of thing. So that was a huge step of growth. I remember the very first time we kind of figured out that rhythm, and we were like, oh wow, we both learned so much.
Yeah, because I like actually, when you left, it was like the first time, because as an anxious, it's like, I'm so afraid that I'm going to lose friends. I'm going to lose people in my life. And actually, I want to bring this up, obviously not the details of it, but something that was really challenging for me, and I think I still am processing or working through this element, is there was a time you were mad at me for a specific thing, but you didn't tell me for 24 to 48 hours but you didn't give any clues that you were mad at me. And then you just like, then you just brought it up. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I don't know. I don't remember the particular situation, because the one I'm thinking of, I did tell you what it was, but I was very mad and didn't address it for like a full 24 hours still.
Yes. Yeah,
That's,
but I think you had known about this thing, or like you were mad about it, but acting fine for like 24 hours, then got mad, and then told me then we talked about it 24 hours later.
is this the one where you came into my room and you were like, I don't want to play this game. Let's just address it. I'm not going to happening. Is that one?
I don't know. Now I'm like,
that made me mad. And I don't know if that was because I'm not sure exactly why, but I remember you came into my room and you're like, hey, I'm not going to play this game. Like, we need to address what's happening here. Let's not just continue on like nothing happened. And that made me mad, probably for a few reasons. One, it probably triggered me because like my family dealt with situations by not talking about them. So I thought that was okay. So then for you to come in and be like, it's not okay to not talk about something, and that made me mad, because I was like, what? This is, up until now, I thought that this was how you handled things. And then two, it made me mad because I was like, it's hard. It was and still is really hard for me to bring up things that are problematic. Actually, it's gotten way easier since living with you, now that I think about it. But so when you said I'm not playing this game, to me it felt like it's not a game. Like, this is so hard for me to bring something up that's bothering me. I'm not trying to play a game. I'm just fucking scared.
So this is actually a perfect example. So I went into defensiveness. You were stonewalling, and I went, so if I were to do that again now, what I would do is give you your space, but there is an element where people run away in space. There are appropriate timelines for dealing with things. And if you take too long to deal with things, and I'm talking like more than 24 hours, that's an avoidant tactic in itself. Mm-hmm. So there's like a special space in between. But if I were to deal with that now, I would give you some space, and I would say probably something along the lines of like, hey, Shawna, I recognize that it's very hard for you to talk about these things. And that you grew up not doing this as a practice. However, I have the thought that we need to deal with this sooner than later, else it's going to just create more tensions in the future. I'd probably do that. Instead of like, sassy, this ain't no game, okay? Like, I was taking it personally. That's the thing, right?
Yeah. I'm not mad that you said that now, though. Now thinking back, I'm like, that's the perfect thing. I'm glad you said that. Like, that's reflective for us both.
You know what? And I do have a feeling, because I don't lean towards anger often. You've talked about this, obviously. I don't lean towards anger often. So sometimes when I do get angry, anger is a clear sign of needing a boundary, needing to speak something. And if you can get comfortable with the anger and actually take action from it without being aggressive, hostile, then it's a very powerful emotion. People don't want to touch on their anger, but it's very powerful. However, I have noticed in my life, when I do get angry, the people who know me the most and love me the most do take what I say seriously.
Yeah, because it's not very often that you get angry. Like, it's scary when Nicole gets angry. You don't want to be around. I can only think of one time, actually, when we lived together, that you were really angry, aside from like our arguments, but even then you weren't that angry. But only one time I can think you were really angry, and I remember you threw something, and I was like,
it was a tech thing. It was computer issues.
Okay, 2 times then, because there's one other time. But yeah, computer issues was intense too.
But was I angry when I threw something? What was I angry about? Is there?
I'll tell you later. You probably won't want me to say to the whole world.
But it was like a personal issue, not with you.
Yeah, no, not with me. Not with
me. Okay, yeah.
Well, yeah, with me at all, but it was scary because I'd never see you angry. It's so rare. But what I was going to say is that more often than not, when I would notice myself getting angry, it was angry at myself. It wasn't angry at you. So, and I noticed this too with Jeremy, is if something has happened and I feel like you've crossed a boundary, or maybe you didn't even know, maybe I just need to set a boundary, and then I don't, or I don't ask for what I need, then I get angry. And I used to think that I was angry at you, but I've realized now it's angry at myself for not setting that boundary. And then as soon as I set that or ask for what I need, it goes away.
Yeah, and I would say that that's the same for an anxious attachment style too, but the anger comes like the blockage for like setting boundaries comes at the fear of, if I set a boundary, this person's gonna cut me out of their life.
Mm.
And then what often happens is a manipulation. And this is what, like we've talked about before, is it's such a subconscious. I didn't know I was being manipulative in the past, because it's so subconscious. It's the manipulation is, if I do everything correct, if I'm a really, really good friend to Shawna, if I make sure she's happy, if I feel like her emotions are off, and then she won't cut me out of her life. And then I don't even need to ask for my boundaries. I don't even need to have these things because I've done everything right. I've set up the situation perfectly to not have to have the hard conversation.
Mm. So if someone does that, how is that destructive?
Because it's a lack of authenticity. And it doesn't give people the opportunity to have hard conversations that actually, and like set boundaries, practice setting boundaries in order to create deeper intimacy. Because you cannot have intimacy without being seen. So somebody who does not set boundaries enough will start to have resentment. And when you start to have resentment, this is poisoning relationships, right? Whether you're anxious or avoidant. If you're not practiced in setting boundaries, asking for your needs to be met, but not from a needy place, and not from a needy place means, and as I say this, I just want everybody to know, this is not me being an expert at it. It takes like, it is what it is. It takes practice and it takes an embodiment. But you can have the wisdom and the knowledge before it actually instills fully in you. That being said, asking for your boundaries and needs to be met is to truly be okay if somebody walks away, if a situation ends. Because you're listening so closely to your heart's desires, to your heart's whispers, to that inner, honestly, self-worth, that abandoning that is going to be more painful than somebody else abandoning you.
Yeah, than losing that person. Yeah. Yeah.
So, what we're talking about, anger. So, do you want to share that one story where you were like angry at me?
Like our first point?
No one, because of the shirt I was wearing.
Oh.
Because I think this is interesting. I want to touch on this. So, yeah, why don't you share a condensed version from your perspective?
Yeah. So, we were teaching a workshop one day. This was like January 2021, I think. It was during the pandemic. And Nicole was wearing a shirt that was a similar color to her eyes, and I thought that her eyes looked really pretty in that shirt. But I thought this thought. And then because I'm in a, like, I don't want to say I am an avoidant. I feel like I gravitate to being avoidant in certain circumstances, but also just like vulnerability has been hard for me. And for me, it felt very vulnerable to tell someone a compliment about themselves. So I thought her eyes look really pretty. And then my I don't know, ego, self-sabotage, whatever you want to call it, that part of me kicked in and was like, no, you can't be vulnerable. Don't say this thing. And then I got angry within myself. This is like a whirlwind of emotions so quickly. And then I got really angry with myself for not saying the vulnerable thing, not just being genuine. And then I took that anger out on Nicole. I consciously thought, I want to like be mean to Nicole. Like, and I don't know if I was actually mean to you, but I'm sure you felt an energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, what did I do? I was like teaching this workshop. I was like super happy. I was like in my element. And then all of a sudden you're like shutting down and like sending anger vibes towards me. And I'm like, and I'm like, I'm just acting perfect. I was just being myself. What happened?
Yeah. So it's so interesting as somebody who, like there's a lot of reasons for why this happened kind of thing, but it was all really an internal battle with myself between being genuine, being vulnerable, being authentic with like my best friend who I love so much, and this side of me that has always kind of like held back or pulled back or stopped me from being vulnerable and stopped me from being really authentic with the people I love, and letting people in. Really because to let someone in, you need to be vulnerable and receive vulnerability. And I was still working on that at that point, and still am. But it was all just an internal battle with me. And then I did the right thing. I realized what happened, and I told Nicole pretty much right away, I think. Like later that day, 4 hours later or something.
I think it might have been a week.
Was it a week?
It was, yeah.
Oh, I thought it was quicker.
Well,
was it watching the Bono,
yeah, it was at the same time.
Yeah. We watched the U2 concert. They were doing streaming live concerts, so we watched that together on like a big screen in our apartment. And then after I had like a spill, I was watching Nicole watch U2, and Nicole loves U2. And I thought part of me, like, I'm just gonna say this, we'll go from there. Part of me thought, like, Nicole was just being so genuine in the way she was watching. Like, she was like smiling and laughing and crying and gasping and just like making whatever face, and she was not caring what she looked like. She was just being herself and being so genuine. And part of me thought, like, she looks kind of silly. But the other part of me thought how free that would feel to just, because I for so long like curated everything I did, every movement or emotion I felt or anything, I curated that so that I would look a certain way. And Nicole was just being completely herself, completely genuine, just watching this concert that she loved so much. And I remember thinking how beautiful you looked, and like how just how great that would feel to just be completely free and not curate your emotions and stuff. So then I think after the U2 and I was thinking that I loved you, how much I loved you, and we had a friend over watching with us, and I didn't want to say it while she was over because I was afraid she would think we were lesbians or something. So I waited till she left, and then it was like a spill all of like, I love you, and it's so cool that you look so free, and also I told you the shirt situation, and then everything came out, and
yeah. And I remember the shirt situation specifically because I had a growth moment too where I felt your energy, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to take this personally. I was like, I was just doing, like, I didn't do anything.
Well, the interesting thing about that moment is that was probably one of the first times that I realized my anger had nothing to do with you.
Mm-hmm.
I consciously noticed, like, oh, I was afraid to say this thing, and now I'm angry at myself for not saying it. So maybe that kind of played into it too, because it wasn't, I don't think, I mean, I'm sure you could feel anger vibes, but I think I pulled back a little bit when I realized it was all, that it really had nothing to do with you.
Right. Yeah. Totally. And like, and I mean, our relationship, we grew so much living living together. And I just learned so much from Shawna too, watching her grow. And I healed, like, honestly, I think people need these experiences so much because you didn't feed in to the anxiousness. So you sparked it, you triggered it. But also it became really clear through our conversations that you weren't going to just let me be anxious either. Like, you weren't going to try to soothe it. You weren't going to try to like make it okay. Does that make sense? So you were like grounded and solid in your own right, where you'd be like, okay, I'm going to take in some feedback from you, but also like you need to take responsibility for what you're doing and how you're feeling. So it wasn't like you went into, trying to enable the thing that wasn't working for me. Yeah.
Right. I don't think I even realized I was doing that. That was just...
That's what comes though with somebody who's like, you're being solid and you're working things out. Like, I just think it's so beautiful. Like, it wouldn't have worked if both of us weren't into actually talking this through.
Yeah.
And it never went away. Like, even when we went this is a good segue. When we went to Ottawa, we were in a car together for 40 plus hours each way. we had a real tension moment on the way back. But as soon as like you start to actually talk about the stuff, the tension subsides and the intimacy actually deepens.
Oh
So
yeah.
so when we're trying to, as people, always avoid the tension and having those hard conversations and sharing the things that might be, for lack of a better term, maybe wounds,
Hmm.
then you don't get onto the other side of it. I
No,
don't.
you're doing such a disservice to yourself and to that person and to the relationship. And if you're able to, like, we'll use my bedroom, setting that boundary in my bedroom as an example. Like, if I am able to set that boundary, like, hey, I really need this to be just a me space, and you respect that, that builds so much trust within us that I was able, one, that I was able to even ask for it. For you also to know that I can ask for what I want, that builds trust for you. And then in the relationship, when you respect the thing I've asked for, that builds so much trust. So if you avoid all these hard conversations, and this goes for any relationship, especially romantic, you're doing a huge disservice to the relationship, and it's going to take longer to build that trust.
100%. I love that you were talking about this. So it builds trust because from someone who is from the anxious side, if that's the way to put it, if I don't trust someone's going to ask me for what they want, then it leaves me in like a space of like a void of like trying to figure out what they want. And of course, that's something as an anxious attachment you need to look at. But when someone actually sets a boundary, it's a relief.
Mm.
It's a relief because now I know exactly what you need and I can help fulfill that need. I
Mm-hmm.
can, I can, and I'm willing to do that, right? Now, if somebody like steps over that boundary and doesn't respect it, I think the reason why people avoid making boundaries at times is because we don't want to be faced with the truth that someone is actually not respecting our boundaries, and maybe that relationship needs to be looked at.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we have to get really honest about, certain friendships or relationships or family members or romantic partners who don't have the capacity to be respectful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, for an anxious especially, but also for me, if I can trust that you will ask for what you need, then you don't need to worry about it. That whole part just drops. So that
Exactly.
trust, you're just going to ask for what you need. If there's a problem, you're just going to tell me.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I got better at too. The both of us got better at is like, even if we were feeling something, um, like that was uncomfortable, instead of like trying to figure out like, is this worth bringing up? Is this not worth bringing up? Which we'll talk about this now. I think we did get better at just being like, hey, like if I felt something from you, like, hey, I feel like I'm feeling something from you. Is that me or is that you? That's what we would say actually quite often.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was more you that would say that to me because I had such a potent energy sometimes about me.
Yeah.
But yeah. And then I would just be like, I think most of the time I would say probably it's just me having some sort of energy or issue. I think if there was an issue, I would say like, yeah, I'm feeling annoyed, but I need to think about it a little more or
Yeah.
something like that. Like just be totally genuine and honest and say what I was feeling. And that, yeah, that created, yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about how much that affected things in a positive way, but just to like be asked that in such a like, and it's not in my mind in the past, conflicts were like always yelling and it would be a fight, but it
With
didn't need,
us?
no, just
Oh, in general.
yeah, in general. um but in asking that, it like really like kind of simmered it. It was just like, what's going on? Let's just talk about it. It doesn't have to be a big thing, and I love you no matter what, so it's not like it's going to end the friendship or the relationship or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think, again, let's go practical. Like what do you think are the best tips for people to start off having hard conversations?
To start off having hard conversations, I'm trying to think of what I did. What was the first thing I did? I think just to be totally genuine with the person that you're trying to have the conversation with. Like,
Hmm.
I, it's tough because when you're in that situation, you feel so much emotion, and it's hard to, like, for me anyway, I found it difficult if I was feeling angry to think through that emotion logically and know where to go. So our first fight, our first big fight that was like 5 days into the pandemic, I was just screaming. I just started screaming. And maybe I definitely wouldn't do it that way now because I don't get as triggered by things. But I was just genuine. I was just feeling what I felt, and I was just saying what was going on for me. And maybe screaming isn't the best way to go about it, but I'm not mad that that happened because we really worked through a lot of things. Um, and that was a pretty good first fight too, because I had my screaming moment, and then we both separated, and then I immediately was like, I can't leave it like this. So I immediately went back and gave you a hug and was like, we're good. I just need to think some more, but we're good. And then we'll come back and talk later.
So something I just remembered as you're saying that, which I think is key, is even though you were, I wouldn't say you were like screaming. You were definitely angry, but it wasn't. You weren't screaming. You weren't contemptuous towards me, and you weren't critical towards me.
Right.
You were actually sharing where you were at, and this is the biggest thing that I've
Yeah.
learned even more in the last little bit. You were saying, I feel like angry, and it feels like I can't feel my emotions around you. So you weren't saying like, Nicole, you're so hard to be around, you're such a difficult person, and I can't even believe you don't let me feel my, like, you weren't projecting onto me. So I remember being like, obviously the energy was intense, but you weren't actually attacking me personally.
Yeah, actually, now that you mentioned that, that's a good thing to bring up. One thing that I noticed that for Jeremy and I, when we get into this pattern sometimes, is we start saying like, well, you did this and you did that. It's like, just focus on yourself. What did I do in this scenario? And I guess maybe that's a good place to start. Focus on yourself. What role, like, how do you feel? What role did you play in the scenario? And yeah, how can you talk about it in a way that's I feel, or I have the thought, or whatever, rather than putting it on the other person.
Yeah.
And I didn't even realize I was doing that then, but
That's probably, I know, I didn't either until you were just saying it. So like, I was reading this amazing book, and they were saying when you're speaking your feelings or your thoughts, do it in a way that's you're actually revealing yourself. It's not to reveal another person. So I know I can get into this place, and defensiveness does this, where it's like I'm gonna reveal in the other person what they need to work on. And although we can see stuff like that in other people very easily at times, um, there's a vulnerability and authenticity that comes to a place where it's like, this is what I'm feeling. This is my perception. And then a humility where it's like, I know I could be off. That's why I'm coming to the conversation.
yeah.
There's so many people who have resentments brewing, and quite frankly, they are off base with their resentments. They are not seeing the situation clearly. And if they never have the courage to share where they're actually at, no one can have a conversation and shine the light back.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's a cycle, because you get like something happens that upsets you, whether it's like crossing your boundaries or something the other person did that upset you, and then you don't speak up about it, and then you build resentments about it, and then you get angry about it, and then once you're angry, you're not seeing the situation clearly. You literally, anger, fear, literally blocks your brain from seeing the situation clearly. So then the same thing just happens over and over and over until you're actually able to just speak about it. So
yeah. And something you would do too, like, which was kind of scary at times, but I appreciated the authenticity, is you'd be like, okay, this is hard for me, but I need to bring something up. Like, you would just authentically be like, like, okay, this is building. I need to talk about it.
mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, I think Simon Sinek talks about this too, like just being authentic with that in itself.
Yeah.
Help.
Yeah. Same thing. Whenever you were like, okay, we just need to have a little chat, I'd be like, oh God. But I mean, that's normal. And then you just get it out of the way right away.
And there's a sting every time. Anytime somebody says, I need to talk to you about something, it does not feel great in your body.
No, it's scary.
It's scary.
Yeah.
And I think the more we had conversations like that, though, the more, again, the trust is built. It's the worst feeling. It's the worst feeling to be in a relationship with somebody, friendship or something, and to think that they won't bring stuff up to you. And then they'll just let you be in the dark as to maybe some of your trauma-based programs or wounds that you're unaware of that you have been affecting them with.
Yeah.
And they just let you go off into life, and they just like either talk about you behind the scenes or cut you out of their life and never tell you that there's essentially food in your teeth, emotional food in your teeth, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, question though,
Yeah.
what happens when you have a friendship and you bring something up to that person in a respectful way, like an I feel like this, I feel that there's this happening, and the other person completely denies anything that's happening?
Mm. This is a tough conversation, or like a tough this is where the back and forth is really important. So again, those four horsemen, if there's defensiveness, criticisms, contempt, or stonewalling present, then wounds are present and they're running the show. Fear's present, running the show.
Mm-hmm.
And if consistently you cannot get to a place where you move out of those four horsemen, the four horsemen of death in relationship. John Gottman can predict to, like, I think 96% by watching couples interact who will be separated based on them tapping into these communication tactics and styles.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're bringing concerns up with a friend or somebody, and they're constantly going to those places and they're never taking responsibility for themselves, that's not a thriving relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's hard to move forward from that place.
It's really hard because you don't get to intimacy. It's an intimacy blocker.
Yeah.
Intimacy, I think it was my friend Kasia said, like, it's into me you see. You cannot have intimacy without being seen, good, bad, ugly.
Yeah.
And those defense mechanisms are literally intimacy, like, blockers. They're not, you can't get past those. They're wounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a big breakdown in trust too. Like, it's a vulnerable place to be like, hey, I feel this way. I feel frustrated, or I feel angry, or whatever, and then have the person deny that any of that is happening, and then breakdown in trust, because so this experience happened to me, and I felt a little bit gaslit too. I felt a little bit like, am I crazy? Is none of that happening? So that's a huge, like, break of trust.
It's interesting though, because, like, but we'll do some world themes here. This is a good place to go. So there are some times that we have feelings and thoughts that feel very real and are valid to us, but they're not true.
Mm.
If someone's coming at you with criticism, defensiveness, and, like, they're probably not seeing the situation clearly either, right? But if someone's coming at you and is like, okay, why are you seeing things that way? What are you and, like, they help you dig down and, like, see different perspectives, then you might actually be able to adjust your perspective. Like, this idea that's in our society right now that's like your feelings and thoughts have to be validated all the time because they're true no matter what. It's like, no. That's why we have these trusted conversations with people who we care about, so that we can all get on the page of the reality, which is what is going to bring out our fullest potential. That's how I see it. Because people say, like, there's different realities and different, yes. But if you're not tapping into the reality that brings out your fullest potential for service to the world, however uniquely that's meant to be for you, then you're not in the highest reality. You're in the wounds.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of gaslighting happening in the world right now, right? So we have people, we're saying, hey, we're concerned about maybe some V injury that we see lots of evidence for. And then someone goes like, that's not true at all. and gets defensive and starts personally attacking you, you're like, okay, you're not seeing it clearly. So the
Yeah.
horseman, I always go back to the horseman. If people are, and if you yourself, like having self-reflective, self-awareness ability to see when you're dropping into those things, yeah, it's important.
What horseman is that?
The gaslighting,
Yeah.
it could probably, well, like somebody denying your reality or denying, it depends. I think we've seen a lot of defensiveness, like,
Mm-hmm.
or contempt. Contempt. That's
Yeah.
what we've seen, which John Gottman says contempt, which is thinking you're better, you know what's best for other people. It's like a superiority. Contempt is the number one relationship killer. Because
Mm.
if you don't want to be around people who think that they're better than you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it looks
Well,
like, I want to give some tangibles here.
mm.
Contempt looks like rolling your eyes at a person, like scoffing, like that kind of energy, like just thinking, they're like pieces of shit, that kind of energy.
Well, you broke down contempt, and didn't you come to kind of like a disgust feeling?
Yeah, disgust is that's a good way to put it too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're feeling disgusted with people, that is contempt, which is in alignment with self-righteousness,
Mm.
which means no matter what side of whatever argument we've been, on, where the C and the V and all the things happening in the last 2 years, 3 years almost, have come down to, if you're feeling disgust about people, you're in a contemptuous,
Mm.
like,
Yeah, that's a really good sign that there's a bit of self-reflection to do. If there,
yeah, and we feel it. Like,
yeah.
it's not about being like, oh, I'm bad for that,
Mm.
but what's actually going on
Yeah,
there.
yeah. It's just an opportunity to get curious. As
Get curious.
get curious. Yeah.
Um, okay, let's shift a little bit. So, Ottawa.
Mm-hmm.
You started speaking out majorly with your business, Everpress. Shawna has an amazing business with jewelry. Wait, I should ask, do you want to say anything else on the attachment styles or relationship stuff?
Um, no, the only thing, I mean, if anybody wants to like look into this more, the first place I would start is figure out what kind you are. Figure out what kind you are and maybe why you are that way. What trauma happened in your past to make you that way. And then that'll give you a really good insight on how to approach situations, and probably some insight on why you approach situations the way you did in the past. That would be
Yeah,
the first practical key piece of advice I would give. And it's a huge, huge help in relationship. Like, us living together and figuring this out about each other helped immensely. And now that I am in a romantic partnership, it just wouldn't be the same if we hadn't had this relationship, if we hadn't lived together and like discovered all these things about ourselves. So yeah, first thing I would say is figure out what you are and why you're that way, and that you won't always be that way.
I was gonna say, so Attached is a good like book to start. When I was reading it years ago, I actually felt physically angry. Like, I felt upset that I didn't know this information sooner, and that I had lived my life in these programs and patterns and didn't even know it. So just be aware of that, a little bit of that grief of growth. And then I want to touch on what Shawna just said and what she said, like, avoid saying I am anxious attachment or I am avoidant attachment. These are just programs that you probably embodied from your family, and you can shift into secure. Like, that's why you're doing the book, why you're reading the book. When we get too tied to these ideas of these attachment styles, I think people become like, that's their personality.
Yeah, yeah. You think that it's always gonna, yeah. And
Excuse me.
one more practical key piece of advice, because I read this book and loved it so much. So it sounds kind of woo. It's called 7 weeks to calling in the one, 7 weeks to attract your soulmate, or something like that. But calling in the one for sure is the main title. Sounds really woo. It sounds like it's only meant for people that like use voodoo dolls or something, but it was so good. It's a workbook. It's 49 exercises, so 7 weeks. And I think they should republish the book and rename it just like How to Have a Good Relationship, like with anyone, with your family, with your friends, with your loved one, because it was revolutionary for me and really helped me see the patterns I had in the past and the role I played in relationships that broke down. And I recommend it to everyone. Even if you're in a relationship, do it with your partner. It would be so, so good and can only help. So I highly recommend that book too.
Yeah, I still need to do that one.
It's so good. You will love it.
I'm sure I will. And that, I think the reason like I think about this is we are kind of like programmed such we do yearn for romantic partnership. So that's where like relationship books can essentially market. And that's what we see online with like a lot of things. It's like marketing, like have the best relationship you've ever, have the best sex in your life. But like if you don't know how to have a relationship with yourself and other people, that is going to, and if you do not have intimate partnership and relationships outside of romantic relationship, that's codependency.
Yeah.
Now you're getting into a place of like, yeah, a place that is a void of suffering that I have experienced in my life. So,
yeah, I was going to say that too. If you are single, I would focus on healing your relationship with yourself and with your friends first before you go look for a partner. Because if you are single, I mean, there's tons of reasons why someone's single, but there's a chance it could be because of how you handle relationships. And to improve that, start with yourself and then start with your friends. And that can improve romantic relationships in the future.
Yeah. And not every, I get this too. Like I've cultivated some very candid relationships in my life with you, with Kasha, with certain people where they're on the same page where you can say like, hey, I'm practicing having hard conversations. Can I share how I'm really feeling? No matter if I think I'm being like, so don't go share your thoughts and feelings with everybody. Don't try to make somebody like a friend or a family member the relationship you want. It's always about the inner work and not trying to change people outside yourself. And that's I'm not saying that's easy. I'm not saying I've mastered that in any capacity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to, I want to do this, chat about this a little bit before we go off. And it is about relationship too. So Shawna has a successful, amazing jewelry business that she started in Edmonton. I'm wearing some of the earrings right now, Everpress. Yeah. Yeah, I'm wearing the earrings I'm representing. And through that, through building her business, she made a lot of relationships with other people in the city, other vendors, other creators. And then we go to Ottawa. And Shawna, from my understanding, seeing you were at the point where you're like, I can't stay quiet about what's going on anymore. Like, I'm going to share my experience in Ottawa. And we're going to share it honestly. Like you and I talked about it. Like, if we're seeing Nazi flags, we're going to show Nazi flags.
Mm-hmm.
We just saw bouncy castles and hugs a lot more. So, yeah. Not even a lot more. I never saw a freaking Nazi flag.
Oh, yeah.
So we were like, we're going. We had this like intuitive knowing that we had to go. And you start speaking out. And what's your experience with that?
Well, you had spoken out quite a bit sooner, in June, I think it was.
Yeah.
Was it June 8th?
Yeah.
Oh, I remember the day.
Yeah.
And so you had already kind of thinned out the people who like, you know, that got angry about your opinion or that really disagreed with you. So they had kind of left your page by then. But for me, I had only started kind of speaking what I was feeling in December. So only about a month or so prior. And so going to the convoy, I had no idea that it was going to be what it was. I had no idea that people would be so angry with me for going. I announced that I was going, and somebody that had followed me for a long time and had bought jewelry from me, and we both were kind of had sort of become like friends in a way. Even she messaged me and was like, I am disgusted by this.
Yeah.
Like, this is racism. And that shocked me. And so throughout our 2 weeks that we were between traveling to Ottawa, being in Ottawa and traveling back, I got a lot of hate. A lot. Also, the community that I had built up was mostly an arts community. So it wasn't people that were looking for controversial opinions. It wasn't people interested in news or even interested in hearing about COVID stuff C stuff.
Yeah.
So it was probably a shock to them too for me to be speaking up about something that was totally unrelated to my jewelry business. And I had a lot of people say too, like, keep this off your jewelry page or kind of thing. But I was like, why? You want me to stop speaking about this thing because it makes you uncomfortable, because it makes you angry? Well, I should filter what I think or say because it makes you more comfortable. That frustrated me. So anyone who said that, I just said, this is what I believe and I'm not hiding it. But yeah, I got a lot of hate. And after that 2 weeks that we were in Ottawa, I kind of like shut down, I think I got like minor depression or like PTSD. I think I still have a little bit of PTSD from it. Um, yeah, because I was just attacked like a lot. And I lost a lot. I hate the term lost because they, like, I didn't lose anything, whatever. If they left, they were meant to leave. So I had about 10% of my following leave because they were upset with me going or whatever. I had people obviously accusing me of being racist. I had people that knew me in the community in Edmonton messaging people that followed me and telling them how horrible I was and that they should unfollow me, which is so interesting. And I just found it really interesting that the people who did these kind of things to me, who sent me hate and just were very disrespectful and destructive, they were all the people who believed that that the convoy was about hate, that it was about like racism and discrimination and all these hateful ideas. But the only people that were like incredibly hateful and disrespectful and rude and just not okay to me were those people. And I had a lot. Now, mind you, with that being said, I did have a lot of support as well. And I did have a lot of people just genuinely asking me questions. They didn't agree with me, but they wanted to get a better understanding of where I was coming from, which was amazing. Every time I had a message like that, I was amazed that somebody would be not personally attacking me and just wanting to know where I was coming from. So yeah, I will say that as well. But it was really, really difficult. And yeah, I definitely got, I just kind of disappeared. I started just hiding from all areas of my life after that. I wasn't online at all. I kind of stopped socializing a lot too. It was right when you left to go to move to Ontario. So I was, yeah, I was kind of provided a convenient opportunity to just kind of shrink a little bit. And it wasn't until probably till like a couple of weeks ago that I really started to feel like myself again, and kind of work through why I had that reaction and what went on there.
Yeah, and I want to just clarify, because, and Shawna kind of did there too. When we're talking about hate, we're talking about, going back to the enforcement, like personal criticisms and contempt towards Shawna, which I experienced too, and I have throughout this. But at the beginning, it's like personally attacking her. It's not attacking the content. Neither one of us would care if somebody was saying, "Oh, here's what I think, and this is the evidence I have." It's like, okay, cool. Shawna and I were on the ground, seeing with our own two eyes. Together combined, we talked to hundreds of people in the time that we were there. We talked to all kinds of people. And it is frustrating. I will say this, it is frustrating when people personally attack you who are not on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would have people messaging me saying like, this is a horrible display of racism. There's so much Nazi flags there. And I would say, well, but I'm here and I haven't seen one. I didn't see any Nazi flags.
No, and it's not to say that shitty things didn't happen. If you have like thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of people, like, I'm sure there were inappropriate things happening at times.
Yes.
Like a music festival or something like that.
Yeah. Stuff like that happens at any large event, and that's not dismissing it. That's not saying it's okay. Obviously, wish that those things wouldn't happen. But when you get that many people together, that kind of stuff does happen. And it was disruptive to Ottawa. It was very disruptive to the city of Ottawa. So I really learned a lot, I will say too, from speaking up and sharing everything that was happening at the convoy. And I told people, like, if you see something that I've gotten wrong or a perspective maybe I haven't seen, send me a message. And I had a lot of people in Ottawa themselves that were frustrated how much the convoy disrupted their daily lives in the city. So I have empathy for that. Yeah, just in general, I really developed a lot of empathy to see other perspectives. So that's a big part about speaking out that I really liked, is I really did get, and empathy is not, like, you are much better at being empathetic than I am. Just for some reason, I'm not naturally geared toward empathy as well. But when someone shares their personal experience of the struggles they're going through, that helps me to have empathy. So it really did help me to see so many other perspectives. Yeah, sorry, I don't know what you even said that made me go off like on that tangent.
And to clarify, empathy is not co-signing a belief or subscribing to a belief. It's just having the capacity to see how someone got to what they believe, or see how someone got to what they're experiencing and what they're feeling. So there are people I have empathy for, that I can say that they're experiencing something that's real to them that I don't think is true.
Yeah, so you can have empathy and see someone else's perspective without agreeing with it.
Exactly. And when you do embody an empathetic heart, and I think people can feel that.
Yeah.
So then conversations and disagreements, if both people are tapping into that type of I want to understand curiosity, the conversations go better. If you're trying to change somebody's mind, I'll say this boldly, there's a chance that you're just trying to validate your own belief system to feel more solid in it, which I would say, if you're needing to do that, you might not be as solid in it.
Yeah, 100%.
So you did get a lot of personal attacks, and I'm curious, because you did kind of there was a lot of changes too. We moved out, you moved across the country, I moved across the country in the opposite way, and like there was lots of changes. So I think with those things as well, you will have like a contraction that happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
But now, a few months out, would you say there's anything you got from, like, anything you learned from experiencing that much hate?
Well, I definitely learned how to navigate conflict, for sure, in a better way. Not personally attacking people and not allowing people to personally attack me was a big thing. Holding space for other people's perspectives without necessarily agreeing with it. I mean, yeah, everyone's experience is so different, but I didn't agree with everyone's experience, but I can see where they're coming from. And it's like everything in life. You need pressure in order to be able to expand afterwards. You need conflict, you need struggle and hard times in order to be able to grow and expand. That's how life works. And there's ebbs and flows of everything. Not everything's all peachy keen all the time. But I learned a lot from that. And also, I mean, our relationship too, that was our last like kind of trip together before you moved out. That was an adventure. Like, we will remember that forever.
Forever.
Yeah.
And it really did, I can say I was there. Like, we can say we were there.
Yeah.
And I know that you know people who like literally changed their mind because of your coverage, and they're like, I can't trust CBC anymore.
Yeah.
Because there was such a discrepancy. Is that the right word? Discrepancy? Yeah. There was such a discrepancy that it was like hard to deny the issue that is taking place, that we see happening in mainstream media.
Yeah. It was kind of cool. My dad would call me. He was kind of the anti-convoy kind of mindset beforehand, and he was watching the news, and he would call me and say, like, the news said this happened, and I would say, that didn't happen. Or they twisted the truth. Actually, what happened was this. And he doesn't watch CBC at all anymore. He realized through that experience how much they lie, how much they spin the truth.
And yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, and I did have some people, like I said, I had people genuinely messaging me, asking me, like, saying that they're frustrated, they just want this all to be over, but they feel like this is just making it worse. And I'm sure some people still have that mindset of that, and that's okay. But I was able to kind of share my opinion and share why that this is the right thing, and why I believe it's important. And I think some people were able to kind of see, like, I was able to gain perspective for their opinion, but I think they were also able to gain perspective for my opinion. And those conversations were really, 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 like, empowering and really rewarding, and really helped me to have empathy for other people's perspective. Yeah.
And that's what I think we need now more than ever, is like, again, you put a boundary that if someone was personally attacking you, we're not going to engage in conversation with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I made a personal boundary that I wasn't going to do that, even though at times it's hard to not be triggered. Yeah.
You really want to. Sometimes you really want to.
You really want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, when someone comes at you, it's like, you're racist, and you're like, you just want to be like, you're an idiot, you know, and
Yeah.
that's not going to help anything.
Well, and I don't know. Should I go into specifics? Should I bring up a specific example? Or is that not?
It's up to you. Navigate it.
You know what? I think I'll leave it out. We don't need to go.
Yeah. Yeah. See, listen to your heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. Now, this is what I think is important to kind of end with, because this whole process, people might be thinking, like, how does attachment style play into Ottawa Convoy, speaking your truth? But if you do not know how to cultivate secure attachment and relationship things, that's the technical term, relationship things, when we don't know how to cultivate meaningful, deep, intimate relationships, it is a lot harder to have courage in the world. Relationships and working through those issues on an individual basis, one-on-one, creates space to be able to go out into the world. And yeah, you got some hate and you're gonna be processing that a bit, but also who you became going through that. You might not have had the courage to do that had you not had support, right?
Mm-hmm. There's no way that I would have been able to do something and speak so publicly about such a controversial thing had I not had the practice with the relationship with you, living together and learning about conflict and setting boundaries. And there's no way I would have had the courage to do that and navigate. Yeah. I probably would have navigated it really badly.
It's interesting you say that. 100% same for me. Because I wouldn't have had the courage. Wow, I didn't even mean to go here in this interview, but it's so true. If I was still in the massive people-pleasing mode, I wouldn't have had the courage to actually speak out.
Mm-hmm.
Because I knew I was going to piss people off. So if I didn't have the solid relationship with you at home, and I mean, at times it was hard for you. You had to set some boundaries, because at the beginning I was dealing with things and it was painful. But yeah, without the solid relationship, it's really, really hard to go into the world and be your full potential without foundational relationships around you. And sometimes this is going to be the hard truth for some people. Sometimes you have to, like, take a leap of faith, because your family can't be that for you. The relationships you currently have can't be that for you. So it's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not to say, because I think people jump to, like, cutting people out of their life a little too easily.
Yeah.
And thinking like, oh, this is triggering me, so I'm going to cut it out of my life. That's not what I'm talking about. Well, I'm talking about meaningful. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a discussion in itself too. When is it okay to cut someone out of your life? And when is it actually something for you to look at if you feel the need to cut someone out of your life? Because I did have a couple people say to me, like, I had to unfollow you because I couldn't understand how you could be this awesome person, but also still have these beliefs about what's happening. And I thought, like, well, if you are not able to see the dualism in who I am and my beliefs, then that's actually a problem with you being able to understand that, to see that. That has nothing to do with me, actually.
Yeah, I agree. I've had people say that to me too, where it's like, but that I think is people's safety in their brains, that they need to like compartmentalize people. So
Yeah.
it's like, it's making it easier to judge the world so that you can stay safe. Whereas how could somebody who has, you know, this beautiful heart, this growth mindset like you, Shawna, this need to, or this opening for people to share their opinions and their beliefs, how could she also be a racist, misogynistic, you know, crazy person, Nazi?
Mm-hmm.
So somebody, it's easier for them to say like, oh, I can't go there, than to be like, well, maybe I have to question my beliefs around this other thing.
Mm. Yeah. Or maybe that's actually not what she is. Maybe she isn't racist. Maybe there's
That's
something.
what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Maybe the programs, the beliefs that I've been probably tying my identity around need to be questioned. But if my identity is wrapped up in that, I don't know how to untwine my identity from this belief system, from this political affiliation, from whatever ideologies.
Yeah.
It is
So,
hard.
final question.
Oh, okay.
Say, what would you give as practical advice for anybody who is still struggling with speaking up for themselves, whether that is about things happening in the world or whether that's in a relationship with a person? How,
Mm.
what advice would you give to someone who is struggling to speak up?
Mm. You have to become aware of how deeply you believe that other people need to change or other circumstances need to change for you to feel good about yourself. Become aware of that. And then start to speak up your thoughts and feelings from a humble place. The most practical tip is saying, I feel, and then you want to say a feeling. You don't want to say a thought like, I feel like you don't like me. No, you want to be like, I feel a contraction in my stomach and a fear that gives me the thought, maybe you don't like me.
Mm.
So start by thinking about revealing yourself. I mean, the most practical way is self-awareness and building that relationship with your inner dialogue, your inner feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about you? What do you think?
The first thing that popped into my mind was become aware of the emotions that might be controlling you.
Mm.
Because a lot of times we go into fear or anger or maybe even like depression or sadness. And those feelings really block you from being able to see a situation clearly. And if you're not conscious that you're feeling that way, then every thought you have is being manipulated by that emotion.
Mm.
So with our relationship, I had to become aware of like the anger I was feeling and why. With speaking up publicly about what's happening in the world, I had to become aware of first my feeling around, for me it was like fear that what's happening in the world is not right, something's off. But then it was also when dealing with other people, of course I would get angry if someone attacked me personally, but to become aware of that and understand what's happening and not act, if I just acted on that anger and started personally attacking other people, that would be the worst way to handle things. So
Yeah.
become conscious of the emotions you're feeling and how they might be controlling you.
Yeah, and realize you're not your emotions. Your life will reflect the emotional state you stay in the majority of the time. And often those emotional states are familiar to childhood. So this is why it's so important to have a self-reflective ability. But those are not who you are.
Yeah.
And I think it's also asking yourself and imagining, this is key. What do you want to experience in relationship? If you don't, I was thinking about this the other day, if you don't have an idea or a vision for what you want to experience in relationship, in your career, in your financial world, in your health world, if you don't have a vision, you're going to stay tied to your wounds, because as human beings, we are here to experience a cycle of emotions. And if we're not stretching into our potential, we're going to spiral with our wounds, because that gives us that high, the emotional high. I think I think it was my dad coined the term emotional masturbation. So you just go in cycles with the emotion you're used to feel alive, but you're not actually stretching into your potential. So yeah, start to look at that, become aware, and actually just ask out loud, hey, can I have a friend who will work through this stuff with me? Start to imagine, like, can I have a relationship, or can, ask God. Yeah. Be willing.
Yeah, be open to that. What would you say was your like emotional comfort zone in the past or from your childhood?
So it's a little bit interesting. I'm still kind of working on it. Interesting, he says. Loneliness. So I've always been pretty joyful. I've always been pretty happy. But I've felt lonely at times. And I've actually been looking at that a lot this week. What I realized yesterday, I'm going to do a post on this. I was really working on being present because I was with my sister Paige yesterday, and we went to the lake. And I realized I busy my brain so often to not be present, because I think being fully present is being comfortable with saying goodbye to every moment that's never going to happen again. We're not going to have this moment again. So there's a grief in the passing of moments. So when you're present, you almost have to face like death, for lack of a better. So I think I tend towards loneliness because there's something to lose when you have like connection. There's something more to lose when you have really deep, meaningful connection. So loneliness is almost like the safety net to not have to say goodbye to each moment, each connection, yeah. How about you? Or any thoughts on that?
I was going to ask how do you think that, how do you think that you have like self-sabotaged in the past, yourself in loneliness?
So I think we're always very tricky as human beings, where we tie identities that actually boost our ego to these things. So I get off on the idea that people just don't get me because I'm so I'm so somehow, deep and advanced. I say that very humbly. I don't believe that's true. But I get off on that storyline. And so of course I have to be lonely to feed that storyline, because that's where the significance comes from. So I think that lonely means I don't have to say goodbye to things that are painful, like relationships. I thought this from a really young age. It's like we find these amazing romantic partnerships, let's say, or it doesn't even need to be romantic, but I was romanticizing it as a kid. We find our perfect person, and then one of us dies. That's fucking tragic. So even when in the best case scenario, someone's dying before the other one. Unless you're on the Titanic and you're the two old people lying in the bed at the end.
Right. Yeah.
Right? So I think the loneliness is the avoidance of loss, and it's, the ego's way of feeling special.
Yeah, interesting.
How about you?
Where would I stay? Kind of similar, I think. Like, I felt safer being alone, and in like a melancholy kind of state, like a low functioning kind of sadness, sort of nostalgic, romanticizing about the past kind of state. That was where I was comfortable. Never, like, not a lot of joy. That would be too much for me. But like a melancholy, and it's funny because when I'd be in a moment, I wouldn't be like, this is so awesome. But later on, I'd be romanticizing about how awesome that moment was. But I couldn't even let myself enjoy the moment in the moment, which is, we're talking about very similar things.
It's interesting. I'm realizing this is going back to anxious avoidant attachment. You avoid the moment, the joy in the moment. And I would hyper want to increase the joy in the moment.
Right.
That's anxious. So it's like, we're experiencing the same thing, but dealing with it in a counterfeit type of way instead of presence, really.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And then getting yourself comfortable to be in a new comfort zone is it's a difficult process for sure.
Yeah, and this doesn't mean that I think so many people think that their personality is what their zone of familiarity and their emotions are. Like, well, I've been melancholy most of my life, so I'm just like a sad girl, like a Billie Eilish sad girl. Um, and then on the flip side, same with me. It's like if I show any anger or grief or like ask for my needs to be met, like I'm the joyful, happy girl,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Like, where do we get to have more authenticity and expansion in the emotions? Yeah.
Yeah. For me, when I finally started to feel more comfortable in joy and actually feel more presence in the moment, I could feel myself physically shifting. It was really interesting. I remember feeling like I physically felt different. It was really cool, but it's a practice for sure. And becoming of, like I said, the emotions that you stay in most of the time and the trauma that led to that is really key to changing that.
It is. Okay, let's I think that this is a good way to end it. So, what are kind of some of the things that around these kinds of topics, speaking out, and they are all connected, that you're working on now? Because we don't ever arrive.
Yeah.
So, what or
Yeah.
and I don't really like the word working. I wrote down playing with, which has kind of a sexual connotation that I'm gonna just go with. What are
Yeah.
you playing with
With
lately?
my emotional masturbation techniques.
But like work is just like, oh, we have to work. It's not
Yeah.
that. It's like, what are you playing with? You're living. You get to do this.
Right. What am I learning? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, honestly, right now, it like the it seems extreme to use this word, but the trauma that I went through in speaking out about my opinion online really did set me into. It felt like I took 10 steps back from all the like self-development progress I had made. So for me right now, I'm just figuring out where I'm still hiding in my life, where I'm not showing up fully, and how to resume or start showing up fully in that area of my life. Because it really did start to affect everything: my socialization, my relationships, my family, my business big time. Like I can't have a successful business as a solo entrepreneur if I'm hiding, if I'm afraid to show up. So, um, yeah, to me, it feels like I'm just kind of going back to the basics right now and relearning a few things, but that's where I'm at.
Super funny because that's like where I'm at too. Where it's that I feel like it's like, oh, you think you're authentic, and then there's a deeper level of authenticity. But that's what intimacy is. It's a never ending depth, right? So yeah, I think that I'm in the same boat. Is how do I full up, show up fully, and that's why I'm starting this interview series. And I am so happy that you were the first person to chat. I obviously think you're a beautiful, amazing person, and seeing you grow over the last few years has been like such a gift, such a gift,
Thank you.
because it's not about people being perfect. It's the transformational quality of life that is the miracle. You are such a beautiful miracle, made on purpose.
See, my
I know.
I
The
had
avoidant.
receiving that, and that was the reason for my face there. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, though. I really appreciate it. Also, I just thank you to Cora for the comment. My friend Cora said that it's been awesome, so I appreciate that. But yes, I would not have grown in the way I've grown if we hadn't lived together. You were a huge part of that. And also, for everyone watching, Nicole and I have officially not lived together for March, April, May, June, July, almost 5 months. Yeah, almost 5 months now.
Yeah.
And it was a very like, she came home one day and was like, I need to leave in 2 days to move to Ontario. So it was a very sudden split. And, I think we both went through some emotional stages of getting used to not living together for the first time in 3 years. And there has been very difficult moments. But anyway, all that just to say that you are a reason for the amount of growth that I've had. And I honestly can't even imagine where I'd be in life right now if we hadn't met.
Same, ditto. And this is a great place to leave this interview on. This is the power of connection. Without each other, we don't have the amount of growth. We don't, because we get to just live in our perspectives in our little world. We need each other. We need to be triggered. We need to connect. We need to have hard conversations. And without that, we don't get to be fully ourselves, I don't think. Mm-hmm. Anyway, okay, tell people about your company and how they can find you.
I make jewelry made with pressed flowers and shells and bugs and leaves and anything I find in the wild. Nicole is wearing a pair of earrings. I always forget to put them on. But you can just check out my handle on Instagram is everpressed, and my website is everpressedjewelry.com. Right now I have moved to Vancouver Island. So if you're in Vancouver Island, maybe you'll see me at a market sometime soon. But for now, yeah, you can just check me out on Instagram. And yeah, thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Shawna, thank you. And I'm sure we'll chat after this. So I love you. Yeah. I love everyone who's tuning in, who's re-listening to this. I really hope somebody's listening to this like multiple years down the road. And Shawna and I get to listen to and go, oh my gosh, we've gotten so much better since then. We get to share even more growth. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I hope that for everybody.
For your so kind comments.
Yes.
My heart.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Much love. Bye, everyone.